One. Okay, so welcome to episode 8 of the Leadership Zoomcast. Who thought we'd have got to episode 8 doing one a week? That's like 2 months worth of discussions around leadership. How you doing, mate?
I'm good. I'm not bad at all. Yeah, you're right. Episode 8. I mean, we started this because Neil came up with the idea. We said we'd do it and see how it went. And we're getting through the topics. We're getting good feedback. We're getting good comments coming back. I think, were we going to look at any of those comments today, Neil?
I'll read one out in a minute,
Yeah.
But so we recorded the last one probably 10 days ago now.
Yeah.
So what have you been doing in the last 10 days?
I think I said on the last one I was going to go out of country. And so the plan there, guys, was we headed off down to France. I had 5 days of golf with some buddies. Really good time in Epernay in the Champagne region of France. Fantastic time. Good to de-stress, good to have a good time, and it was all right. But you've been away as well, haven't you? You've had some time.
Yeah, no, I had a week sailing this week on the south coast of the UK with Anna and another couple.
Yeah,
just amazing, absolutely amazing week. You know, it wasn't much wind, but it was just beautiful out in the Channel. We went to Dartmouth, so we went from Lymington and New Forest all the way to Dartmouth, and then worked our way back. The highlight of the week actually was we had a pod as we were coming back from Devon. We had a pod of 20 to 30 dolphins.
Wow.
Jumping around the front of the boat. And it was the most amazing. You know, I've been sailing for 30 plus years and I've seen the odd dolphin here and there. I've never seen anything like that. It was incredible.
Mate, what we don't realise is some people will never, ever see something like that, right? You know, you've got to be in the right place at the right time. So, hey, fantastic.
Correct, yeah, because, you know, the boat is a small thing in such a big sea.
Yeah.
But it was interesting, actually. One of the things I think would be interesting to do in a leadership podcast is we talked a bit. I wrote down while I was away sailing, because when you're sailing as a skipper, you're a leader of a boat.
Yeah.
And so you're in charge of the planning, the safety, all of those. I just think it'd be a really interesting topic to talk about and maybe link that to leadership. In fact, I know someone who is a skipper of a super yacht, and maybe we could get him on for a.
Yeah.
He'll be shocked now that I've mentioned that.
No, that'd be really good to do, because you're right. Look, we can put this into any dimension you want. Last time round with Ian was a really good conversation. And some of the feedback we had is about how we had taken it out of the corporate world and into the police force and how the similarities and how that works. So you're right, we could take this anywhere, couldn't we?
Well, because leadership, as we found out, you know. So one of the comments back, I'll just read it off the screen here. It says, this was on Ian's, so Ian, who was the Metropolitan Police Superintendent, retired. So the feedback was, great conversation with Ian. If only more people in leadership positions held and lived his views. Being an enabler is key. I always believe that people naturally want to do the best they can. The leader enables them to achieve the best. Keep on delivering great content. There's something, it just hit me. I've read that a few times, but I hadn't really registered that bit about believing that people want to do their best.
Yep.
Is so important. I've always said no one turns up to work to do a crap job.
How many times did we do that? And we say that in our team, right? When we're starting to have a conversation about someone and we go, hang on, just stop. Do we think that was their plan? Right? Yeah. Things go wrong. But you're right. I don't think people plan when they wake up in the morning, who can I upset today or what can I mess up?
And it's worth bearing that in mind, certainly bearing that in mind as a leader, because, and we've had this kind of conversation in one of the other leader podcasts, is if they didn't turn up to do a crap job, what responsibility do you have as a leader in getting them to the point where they did where something didn't go right?
Yeah. So the phrase I'd leave with you guys here is always assume best intention. Right? Always assume best intention in anything that someone's done. There's another phrase actually, just while we're on that one, Neil, that I remember people used to say, we measure ourselves by our intentions, but we measure other people by their actions. So somebody may not have done something and they're a bad guy. I haven't done it either, but I'm gonna. It's in my plan. I just haven't done it yet. So, guys, always assume best intentions around people.
That's great. I love that. And actually, measuring actions kind of leads us nicely onto the topic for this week. Actually,
yep.
So the topic for this week, the title we've called it is "Good Leaders Need a Good Management System," which kind of sounds, leaders is all about inspiration and vision, all that kind of. Management systems all about operational, boring stuff. But let's get into this topic, because in my experience of coaching leaders, of working, and personally being a leader, if you have a good management system, it enables you to do so much more with your team, with your customers, with your business.
Yeah.
Give us your opening thoughts on this topic, please, mate.
I think, look, we spend a lot of time at work. We spend a lot of time thinking about work when we're not at work. The energy that we expel there, the hours we put in, you can decide what return you can get from that. And you get good return if you've got good structure around it. Mm-hmm. There's a common phrase that, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. Well, how does that work? Right? But that's because people can be structured, and you can look at how you do it. So yeah, I think the whole topic that we can discuss here for the next 20 odd minutes is what are some of the techniques and ideas that we'd want to put forward around that.
Yeah, and I think the first thing to explore is why is it important? And so in my experience personally and in coaching other people, and anyone who I coach who's listening to this will laugh as we start talking through this, because I always start off, because most people moan about not having enough time. They moan about being too busy, not being able to get things done. And actually also, having said that, people who know me will also laugh about me talking about management systems as well, as you'll well know. But because it's easy to take the, what do they say, take the splinter out of someone else's eye, but you've got a plank in your own. But I've found that people get busy because they don't have structure, and they get busy with the same things. Now, if you're getting busy with the same things, you need some kind of system to manage those things. Yeah. And that's where management system comes in. Yeah, I don't know.
I just want to explore that a bit, mate, because you're right. Right. For those of you that don't know, Neil and I worked together. We worked together for many years. Neil was probably one of my worst managers and leaders in terms of following the process. But by that, I mean following the process that he was forced to adopt. Did Neil give us back what we needed from the business? Absolutely. Did he deliver results? Absolutely. So there's just something there, Neil, that's worth thinking about, right? Yeah. We're motivated by things that we know can add value, and not by... So I don't know if it's a risk or not. Can you think about that? Why was following that process that you needed to something that you didn't feel excited about doing?
So, I mean, there's a personal kind of reason why I would be like that, and then there's a reason why other people would be like that. In my when I was, more rebellious, shall we say, I would just rebel against anything I was told to do, which is not necessarily the most constructive way of doing things. But I think in general, it actually comes back. We were talking about managing people. It kind of comes back to, if you're too prescriptive, you're not allowing enough creativity. You're not allowing enough personal decision making.
Yeah.
And so I think this comes back to, if your management system says, this is the outcome I need from you, and I need to know how you're doing against it on a regular basis, you work out how you're going to measure that. But this is what I need from you.
Yeah.
So I think if you give someone the outcome that's needed, then you don't have to worry too much about, and the way I want you to do that is this, and this.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's good, guys. So look, that's a really important point, right? So what we're on is the why. Why do we think it's important? Why do we think you should do that? And just as Neil has said, right, make sure that the what you're asking for means something and is of value. And we can come on to the what. But the why has to be because it resonates with you and that you see the value in it. Okay.
We seem to be, it's interesting, the why, what, how, actually, because you just mentioned the what, and the how is kind of how often you do it, the structure, how long the meetings are. And I noticed when we were talking the other day, it was why, what, how. You know, it's the Simon Sinek 3 circles, where why is really important at the center. So the why is key, right? So for any leader, you know, who's listening to this, who's busy, hasn't got enough time, and is constantly stressed, get a management system in place. Okay, there's the why. Reduce your stress, create more time, enable your business to grow, enable your time, spend more time with your people and with your customers. So that's the why. So then let's look at the what.
Well, let's just do one more thing around the why, right? Okay. Because Neil and I were talking earlier about the content of this, and one of the things about the what we'll come on to will be managing upward, managing downward, managing inward, managing outward. If you think about the whys there, your boss is going to have a demand on you and your team. Your boss probably has a demand on you because they've got a demand on them. I don't think they just want to come and annoy you for information. So you need to think about that as well. I don't know if we want to go into that now, Neil, or we come back to that.
No, let's go into it. Yeah, I mean, because we're getting into the what.
Yeah, you know, and so why does your manager come to you or your boss come to you? It's because there's a gap in their information and their knowledge that they're trying to fill from your team. How's your team performing? Are they hitting the goals they need to, etc., etc.? That fills in with them. Take something else from the outward. The outward is the markets might not be screaming for information about it, but you need to tell the market. You need to tell the market what you're doing, why your team is good, why your business is good, why your people are good. If you don't tell them, they don't know. And guess what? Other teams are telling them about theirs. So it's important that you understand the reason to do this, the why. The reason to do it is because there may be many reasons. Because your boss needs something, because your people need something. Your people are coming to work every day and spending a minimum of 40 hours of work at work every week. Why? They don't know what they're feeding into unless you tell them. They don't know what difference they're making unless you tell them.
And I think what I've found working with, you know, you've got two ends of the scale I've seen. In large organizations, at one end of the scale, I'll try and fit on the screen here, at one end of the scale, you've got over management system. You've got too much. There's too many meetings. There's pre-meetings. There's meetings before meetings to prepare for the meeting. You know, and it's just crazy. There's a set of charts sent out, a deck sent out with this chart needs to be in this order and this information. And actually in the meeting, only 2 of those charts are reviewed.
Yeah.
So you've got a team of people preparing stuff and organizing these meetings, and it's not very productive. So at one end of the scale, you've got that. At the other end of the scale, you know, when I'm working with small business, they've got no management system, and everything is run in not crisis management, is in reactive management. It's reactive. We need this information. I want to know this. And they phone up someone, email someone. So they then stop what they're doing to get that information because the boss has asked for it.
Yeah.
So you end up in this reactive system. And at the other end of the scale, you've got this over-engineered system. And something in the middle is probably about right.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're right. I mean, the worry is that you're fitting into a management system that's designed as a generic, and it might not suit what your team is doing or the way that your team works, especially if you are a real agent of change. And if you do have a really good connection to your team, you guys have designed how you work together and how you get the best out of each other. And the management system probably wasn't designed around that. So, no. You might have to kind of find a way to fit within that, because at the end of the day, you've got to keep your bosses happy.
So one of the things, talking about managing upwards, right? Because it's not always obvious what your boss needs, how often they need it, and that kind of thing, right? So, and it's obvious if you're being told to provide it, which happens in some organizations, but in other organizations, it doesn't. And what I've coached people to do, which has been reasonably successful, and I'd be interested in your view on this. If someone came to you and said, Albert, I need to know what you need from me, how often you need it, how will you know whether it's good or bad? And so how would you feel if someone came and asked you what you needed to know to be able to do what your job or you to lead upwards?
So this is somebody reporting into me?
Yeah.
I think I'd start with, I think I'd have to be clear on what are we trying to do as a team? What are our goals? What are our objectives? And then what are the inputs that come into that matter? So let's make an assumption. Let's go back, right? We ran a maintenance and technology support business that had a responsibility to the corporation to deliver certain financials. So we had to deliver revenue and profit. We had to deliver growth of our customers and our contracts. We had to deliver service to thousands of customers, right? Now, if something you're going to provide is going to either help me run the business better, it's going to help me improve the business today, or it's going to help me communicate what we're doing, then it's valuable to me. Otherwise, I don't know whether I need it.
So I'll ask the question again, right? So how would you feel about someone asking you, what do they need from you? What do you need from them?
I think I'd feel positive and I'd feel comfortable that they're looking to make the best use of their time and make sure that my requirements are fulfilled. That's how I'd feel. I wouldn't feel anything. I think they want to make sure that where they're going to put their effort is going to meet what's important to me.
So the reason I asked that question is because when I've done this with people I'm working with, they don't feel comfortable going and asking that question. But when they do, they find they get an incredibly positive response. You know, I really appreciate you asking me about that, because I don't want you to send me loads and loads of information on a regular basis. I just need to know these 3 or 4 things once a week or once a month. And let's have 30 minutes on the phone every week. And they really appreciate being asked.
Yeah. I mean, and, you know, so that's just being open, having an open conversation. But if you haven't got your relationship right with your boss, maybe you couldn't go and do that. But you know what? I think what you just said then, Neil, is absolutely great. You probably win yourself some brownie points by doing it as well, right? I mean, I know it's might not be your goal, but it also means you don't waste your time doing things you don't need to. There was a guy who used to work in a business that I ran in years ago, really quickly, and he used to run this report. And this report apparently took him about 3 or 4 days to run every single month. Put all this effort into it, and off it went. And I was sitting talking to him over a coffee one day. He was, I'm not sounding arrogant, guys, but he was 3 levels below me in the management chain. So to have that open conversation was quite good. And he said, I ran this report. And I said, who uses that report? He said, I don't know. I said, what do they get from it? And he said, I don't know. I said, is it valuable? He said, I don't know. I just run it. I said, tell you what, between you and me, you've got my approval. Don't run it next month. Give me a call and let me know who calls you up. Right, 6 months later, he hadn't phoned me. I called him and said, hey, what happened to that? He never, ever got called up on it. He was just doing what so you got to think about, guys, the thing you're doing and your management system needs to dictate, are you adding value? Are you doing things that matter to the organization or to your customers or to your stakeholders? Because if they don't, question whether
actually, I heard a similar story with someone who worked with me years ago. They put a password on a report that they ran and took them several days to run. And they didn't tell people what the password was. They had to come and ask for it, send it off. And no one ever came and asked for the password. So they knew it wasn't being used.
Great call.
So they just sent the same thing every month.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about this management down, because this is where I find the most value comes to leaders. Because, you know, typical leaders are, you know, whether you're a sales or whether you're a P&L owner, you've got a team that's working with you and you're constantly having phone calls with them. You're asking them for information. They're asking you for information. There's an ongoing, and it becomes very reactive.
Yeah.
And what I learned personally and what I coach people to do is build a regular management system. Call it management, call it regular contact with people you have to, you know, that need information from you regularly, or you need information from them regularly. Don't do it on an ad hoc basis. Do it on a regular basis that you schedule in. Schedule in 30, 40 minutes every week with the people that need that most. And then just say, everything you will need from me, we'll use this 40 minutes for it. Or everything I need from you, I promise you, I'll only ask you on this 40-minute call unless it's urgent, obviously, unless there's something. And when I implemented that, it freed 1 day a week.
Yeah.
1 day a week of time. And I could use that time for more not urgent but important things. I don't know. What's your experience of that kind of?
No, I think that's really good. Just to comment on what you did there, Neil, you're absolutely right, because one of the things that does is they know when it's expected. They know they're going to get airtime with you. I mean, gosh, people want airtime with their boss, but they don't always ask for it, right?
Correct.
So they know they're going to get airtime with you. They know that's an opportunity at which they can raise topics on their side. They'll meet your requirements as well when they get there to do that. And it has the side effect of the fact you're always in touch with your team as well, and you've got your finger on the pulse all the time, right? Not because you're inspecting them, but because you're keeping the relationship and the machine running smoothly. So no, I think it's absolutely important that you do that, and that everybody knows that there is a set pattern of operating. Listen, we've had bosses where you never got the airtime you wanted. They had call meetings and never turned up, and it's frustrating and it questions the value. So I think you're absolutely right to lay out a good structure. Yeah.
So there's two things there, right? Firstly, if there isn't any contact and you can't get hold of your boss, or you can't, there's a vacuum, and the vacuum is always filled with guessing. People guess what the situation is, or they assume someone's not doing something because they don't know, or they think something else. So a vacuum is always filled with opinions. So get rid of the vacuum by having regular contact. There's a guy I work with at the moment who I know he listens to these, so I just want to recognise him for implementing a fantastic. He did this, implemented this, and was really strict with his team. If they phoned him up and it wasn't one of them, he said, "Is this urgent?" And they said, "No, it's not urgent." Okay, well then we'll do it on Monday morning or Wednesday or whenever it was in our 40-minute call. And it took about 4 weeks, but they got used to him saying, "No, we'll deal with it enough." And they really appreciated, this is the feedback I've had, is they really appreciate having the regular contact, knowing they were going to have their time.
Yeah.
And it meant that he knew he was going to have that time as well. So he had to be quite disciplined with it and not send loads of emails off. And it has created time for him. So I know it works. And that's a great example.
Just something around that as well then, guys, right? You're going to have this regular contact. You're going to be talking to your guys about things that are important to them, important to you, etc., etc. I don't know what you think about it, Neil. A tip I'd put is write things down. Guys, you've got to write things down, right? Don't leave open what you thought happened in that conversation and what you thought was agreed and what you thought you were going to check next time you came back together. It's not because you're going to track somebody and say, "I gotcha, you didn't do what you said you were going to do." It's because if you both agreed something was important, get it written down and make sure you can come back to it next time, right?
That's a really good point. Really, really good point. And I have to say, I've not been brilliant at that in the past. And I admire when someone sends me a set of notes from a meeting I've had with them. I think I love that. I wish I was as good as that. I write them all in a notebook, and I have a date in the notebook which I can always go back to and look through. But I don't write them down. And but it's a really, really good point, actually, Albert. The other thing I learned this from the 4-Hour Work Week, which is Tim Ferriss's book that he wrote probably 15 years ago now. But one of the best books, I've read it about 4 times, and every time I learned something new. And I used to always give it to my managers at the time. And in the 4-Hour Work Week, he talks about batching, about doing certain tasks that are similar over all at the same time. You batch them together.
Yeah.
But this is a little tip I would recommend, and I learned this through harsh experiences. I used to schedule reviews with my team on different days. And so every day I was busy with 2 or 3 calls. And what I then realized was, after reading the 4-Hour Work Week, why don't I put them all on one day, stack them instead of horizontal, so they're all on one day, 40 minutes each, and just have that every conversation is similar because it's with your team. So that worked really, really well. I'd highly recommend it because that frees up diary time. And then you've got another quality problem, which is, what do I do with that spare time I've suddenly generated?
Look, it's unlikely it's all going to work out exactly as you want, but there's a reasonable chance as well that you might pick up things in each of those individual conversations that pertain to each other, right? Hey, Dave, listen, I've just been talking to Paul, and Paul mentioned about blah, blah, blah. Could you give him a call, and lock it together? Those things happen, guys, honestly, and you shortcut what could have been another week or 2 weeks of an important action.
Right? Yeah. And it doesn't mean that, this isn't a big business thing. This, there's another company I work with. There's probably about 25 people, and it had an owner, chief exec, who was like the managing director. And I know this is a really important point that you make regularly, is you don't have to do it yourself. And he brought in a general manager, and we worked together on the general manager running all this operational stuff. And the people in the business, so the first line manager or the managers in the business, loved the fact that they now had this regular structure where they could organize their business around. Yeah. Rather than trying to get hold of this entrepreneurial guy who's kind of all over the place and they never got any time with him, it made such a huge difference to the business.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important point.
Yeah. I was just thinking there's a couple of things here from what you said there about running meetings and stuff. I'm thinking, Neil, that's probably a topic on its own, right? Maybe it's something we'll come back and do separately.
Yeah.
I think if we dive into the topic of running meetings, an effective meeting, I think we're going to use a lot more time. We're kind of 28 minutes here, and I know we've always wanted to keep it to about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
We've probably still got a couple of other things that we probably want to cover.
Well, go on then. Well, what would you like to get into this session about management system?
I think the other thing, just to come back to what Neil said there about it doesn't have to be you, right? A phrase I always learned when I became a manager was only do what only you can do. Now that sounds, again, a little bit arrogant. I'm not going to touch other things. But what it's meant to say is basically if somebody else could be managing that for you, get them involved doing that. Have an operations manager that works with you, that documents the actions from a meeting or from a conversation. They can go back to the people involved and follow up for them and make sure. They can report back to you how that's going. You don't have to take all this on personally, right? Running an effective team means exactly that. Get people doing in the team what's important and what can add value, and everybody has different skills, right? So I think that's really important. Don't feel when Neil and I talk about management system or governance or any of those things that you go, oh my gosh, I've got so much to do. No, just make sure it happens. You don't have to do it, right? But you've got to have it.
And as I mentioned with this smaller business, so some people say, yeah, but we haven't got the headcount, we haven't got the people to do that. Well, actually, try and find it so that it's someone's job, or try and carve out a role for someone. Or one of the things I did when I set up my own businesses was I hired a virtual assistant. And so you're not paying a full-time salaried person, you're paying for an outsource. Brilliant service to help me operationalize some of the stuff and get the organization around it. You don't have to do it yourself, but make sure you've got someone who is doing it. I think it's a really good one.
I remember, I think it was probably about a year ago, maybe more, you'll tell me, that when we went out for a meal, we celebrated the fact that you'd had 10 years plus of success in your business, right? Well, I'd worked with you for many of those years. I didn't even know you had a business, right? So I'd be interested. Any other thoughts around you running a small business, right? Because we've talked a bit here. A lot of the stuff we've talked about here is very corporate and where we came through our major roles. But any other thoughts from you on running a small business?
So when it comes to management system, because there's lots of thoughts around running a micro business. Basically, is what I run, a micro business. And so I don't have any permanent staff. So the management system is very different. I have people who do certain tasks on a number of hours a month basis. Okay. And so we kind of touch base on a regular basis to see how they're doing and are there any issues or anything like that. So I don't have the management system you have in an organization where you've got regular employees. But each person has their own tasks, and we speak regularly. Okay. So it doesn't have to be, but I do know what my management system is with the people that I have, or the outsourced team I have.
And when they're not doing it for you, they're doing the same thing for someone else.
Some of them are, yeah.
Possibly not. Yeah. So again, now you've got a bunch of specialists, right? Yeah. You guys have got specializing in finance or invoicing or admin, or as you said, with your virtual assistant, right?
Yeah.
So that's something as well to think about, guys. It's a really good point, actually. I hadn't realized, Neil. You don't have to have everybody has to be someone in a role. You just need someone to perform the tasks. Right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And they fit in the management system.
Yeah. Yeah.
So any last thoughts you want to bring up on this one?
I think we come full circle, actually. Right, as we said at the start, guys, you've got to have a management system and you've got to have structure, governance, call it what you want. If you don't, how are you controlling how your time is best being spent and that of your people? Yeah. So make sure you've got one. If it's not perfect, it doesn't matter. You must have heard the phrase, don't let perfect be the enemy of good, right? If it's good enough, it's good enough. You can always tweak it and improve it and make it better. But you've got to have one, and it controls where you spend your time. The other thing is all the team know what everybody else is doing as well, right? There's a communication issue dealt with as well. Yeah, I probably wouldn't say anything more than that right now, Neil.
No, I think it feels like, you know, the topic that no one wants to talk about, management system, walking through treacle, you know, just that. But leaders need to have it so that they can then go and do the leading, do the flying, do the visioning stuff. Because if you don't have it, your business is collapsing behind you, yeah. Or the opposite is you're being dragged into the management system and you're not being able to do the stuff that you really need to do to grow the business.
I'm sad. I love it. I love it.
and do you know what? I do now more than I did because I realize the value of it.
Yeah.
So look, I'll tell you what. Why don't you wrap up this week for us?
Okay, guys. Thank you very much for listening. I hope the topic was useful. Right? We did say a while ago we'd come and do this. It might not sound exciting, but if you think about what we've just gone through, hopefully it can add value for you. As Neil has said before, down there somewhere is the subscribe button. So please do subscribe for us on YouTube. Hopefully it's where you're watching it. You can also hear this on podcast. We have had some feedback about people listening on podcasts. Great if you're out running or you're driving or you're pretending to listen to your partner or whatever. So, you know, by all means, make use of all that. Please give us some more feedbacks and comments because we're using those to help decide whether we're doing the right things and what's coming next. So overall, guys, thank you very much for spending the time. Neil, I'll leave you to finally close off.
No, that's good for me. So thanks everyone for listening. Albert, great to see you again. And we've got a guest joining us next week.
We do.
Which I'm really excited about, which we'll tell you about next week.
Fantastic.
Cheers mate.
Guys. All the best. See you later.